There it is.
There we go. Okay, we're officially recording. It's Wednesday, February 12th in the Advanced Branding Collaborative. Welcome, everybody. We know we've got a few people still kind of coming in. We've got a little bit of technical difficulties, and it's not the user, right, Roy? But no, just kidding. But we're starting to change things around to where each person's going to be hosting some topics over the next few months. We've got some amazing content coming up here, and we just finished with some amazing things regarding LinkedIn. Actually, I'm just starting to work on a platform using all of the LinkedIn secrets, if you will, and the formula for April. So April's on. And so it'll be great to actually have that testimony to see how her business will be able to succeed because of this product. For the next few weeks, though, we're going to be talking about podcasting. And the reason why we thought this topic would be extremely important is because it is one of the best ways to get in front of an audience. It's used globally. And whether you're thinking about starting your own podcast or actually just being a member on a podcast so that you could talk about your product, your service, what you're doing to impact this world, whatever it may be, whatever your message is, podcasting is just a great format to do that. Podcasting traditionally is obviously audio, and a lot of people are doing both audio and video. They still call it kind of podcasting or vcasting, depending on who you're speaking to. But Roy's going to be taking over, and he's going to host essentially the beginning. We're going to talk today about the basics of podcasting, just so we understand exactly, some of the dynamics and scratching the surface. And then we're going to build upon that over the next few weeks, and then even have some premium podcasters hopefully joining us in a few weeks. And then that'll be an opportunity for each and every one of you to obtain more exposure as well, so that we can help you get on more podcasts. So with that, Roy, take it away.
Okay. This is basically going to be an introduction into podcasting. Our objectives today are to cover what is podcasting, the popularity of podcasting, why you do a podcast, how to start a podcast, and the types of podcasts. And, kind of like what Robert said, basically a podcast is either a video or video and audio message. You'll see a lot of podcasters, they'll have their camera set up and they'll be doing video as well as the audio, and some are just audio. And the audio podcast to me makes me think of a audio book, and one of the things about podcasting is a lot of people listen to podcasts going to and from work when they're in their cars, or when they may be doing something and they can have that in the background, so they can be out mowing the lawn, but they can be listening to a podcast at the same time. So they're pretty versatile. Podcast came from the word iPod and broadcast. That's how the word podcast came together. And it was in about 2004 by a guy named Ben Hammersley. He's the one that kind of coined that phrase. And basically, it's a preparation and distribution of audio using our audio files, using RSS files, which are really simple syndication. So that goes to the files of your computer. Now, podcasting, most of them are like series. It'll be a series of different topics or, discussions about one topic. And a lot of those you can subscribe to. They're automatic. They may do them weekly, monthly, daily. It depends on the podcaster.
Yeah, Roy, just to kind of add on that. So obviously I do subscribe to a handful of podcasters because I like their content. But I have found, in the beginning, there were a lot of people that were kind of generalized, right? And there still is, just general podcasters. They'll host and talk to people about a wide variety of things, kind of like a talk show.
Exactly.
Something that you'd see on TV. But I've noticed recently in the last 2 years, many of them really have fallen into their own little niche, right? And so there's podcasters. I mean, if you want to know about horseback riding, there's a podcaster that talks about horseback riding. You know, if you want to know about basket weaving, it's out there. And so, but I think that's exciting because you have the ability to tune in. And then just to piggyback on what you mentioned in the beginning, you're right. Based on some of the things we studied before, podcasting, it's actually people would rather watch or listen to a podcast before watching a video, which I always thought it was the other way around. But once we started looking at the stats, you can multitask, right? So I can do my work and listen to my favorite podcaster and not have to worry about visually what they're doing or talking about online. And then the last thing I was just going to mention, when you said some podcasters do both, we talked about it in the respect that if you're thinking about just getting into podcasting for the first time and you're using a format just like this, right? You're using Zoom. If you start out doing it with video, you have the ability to do both, right? You can have your, an RSS feed, you can have an audio feed, you can have video, but you can't do it the other way around. So if you're just recording yourself, you can't magically then create a video. So
yeah, strictly audio that way.
Yeah. So anyway, just a little bit.
But one thing about podcasting, anybody can be a podcaster. If you got a microphone and some recording software, poof, you're a podcaster. If that's what you want to do, it's pretty easy to do, and we'll go into equipment farther down the road. But it was originally considered audio blogging when it first came out. There's over 700,000 current podcasts.
Wow.
And 29 million podcast episodes. 29 million.
Pretty impressive.
And in 2018, there were 550,000 active podcasts and 18.5 million podcast episodes. So it's doubled. And it's growing. It's rapidly growing. And interestingly enough, most people listen to 4 to 5 hours of podcast a week. People that listen to podcasts. So I mean, it's almost one 8-hour workday.
Wow.
To put it in perspective, the people listen to podcasts. But think about that, and if I don't know how it is where you guys live, but in Dallas, on a good day, it takes you an hour to get anywhere. So going to and from work, you can listen to a podcast because most of them are 30 minutes to an hour.
Right.
So you're driving anyway, so why not?
And the I guess the benefit, because really it's almost like your favorite radio station, but the difference is you have control.
Mm-hmm.
Your time, you can pause it. In some cases you can download it, just not everywhere, but in some cases you can. But yeah, you have control of that information. So that is a benefit for sure.
And it says the best podcasts are 30 minutes to 60 minutes. That's kind of the sweet spot for podcast.
That makes sense.
And
wait, you not 8 hours?
No.
I only say that for our viewers because I've actually known a couple people to do like 5, 6, 7, 8 hour videos, and so those don't work.
Yeah. And Leslie's coming on. But anyway,
welcome.
So most 40% of the people listen to podcasts on the go while they're doing something, going someplace. They're not sitting right here and listening to a podcast. Millennials really love podcasts. They listen to, the 18 to 34 18 to 34 year old are the ones they do 38% of the podcasting, listen to podcasts. That group, 38%. You're muted, Robert.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So I thought so. Of course, if you can do it on your phone, the millennials love it. And, you can do the podcast on your phone. There's a lot of apps. We'll talk about that in the future. So why do you want to do a podcast? It helps you establish a rapport with your audience. People get a chance to know you, especially if you're doing a video with your podcast. They can see you. They kind of get to know you. If you're an expert, it gives you kind of a unique opportunity to show your expertise and have an in-depth relationship with your audience. You can do it in either audio, video, or both. And you get to convey your personality more in the podcast. People get to know you better. You can get content from around the world free. And think about that. The stuff information you can get from people all over the world. It doesn't cost you anything. It's on-demand content too. If you're searching for, somebody that paints flowers, and want to do a podcast, you can search that and find somebody that has a podcast on it.
Yeah, there's everything. And the other thing too is it's not censored, right? So in most cases, I'm not saying that. So yeah, if you've got a favorite podcaster, and when I say uncensored, I'm not just talking about, raw language. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that you have that freedom, the ability to listen to certain topics that you may not ever be able to hear on TV or radio. Mm-hmm. So I do like that.
Yeah, and you're not in a pot. Oh, Wendy, did you want to say something?
Well, I have a question, and maybe it's kind of a dumb question, but when I go on Google, for example, and I search for something, other than YouTube videos, which I know a lot of people post their podcasts to YouTube, mm-hmm. How do you search for a podcast? I mean, because the podcasts don't usually come up in the search engines.
Usually, what I did, you and I talked about the Rudy Giuliani podcast.
Right.
I just go in there and search Rudy Giuliani podcast.
But you did it in YouTube, right?
Well, I found one in YouTube, but you should be able to search it in Google. Search podcast Rudy Giuliani. You should.
So if you just have to put podcast behind it then.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, typically.
So it's not like you have to go to Spotify or iTunes or wherever you can just
go. However, and maybe, I don't know if Roy's going to talk about that today or if it's going to be part of the content throughout the month, but without a doubt, there are some major channels, right?
Yeah.
Where you can, where we can pull in the number one hits, the number one podcasters.
Yeah.
And some of them actually have to be verified, like to get on iTunes, to at least hit the top list, you really have to be, you have to meet qualifications and have X amount of listeners and subscribers. Really, it's all about subscriptions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You got to build those up. And, you can do long form content in a podcast. You're not limited to 140 characters or, so much space like you do in social media. So that gives you a chance just to do your content the way you want to. And also a lot of times people feel closer to you than just listen to something on radio. Mm-hmm. Although it's audio, it's still, the podcast is a little bit different. If you're doing the video, then that's even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I like is, at least with a few of the podcasters that I subscribe to, is I'll catch an episode that's real fascinating, and they'll maybe reference the fact that, even if I haven't listened to them in a week or so, they'll reference, well, in last week's podcast, or, et cetera, et cetera. And you can just reference back. You can actually just start to sift around and you can look through the history. Unlike a radio station, if you didn't catch all the information, you don't have the ability to go back. So
yeah, exactly. So if someone's wanting to start a podcast, you've got to think about what your mission is. What is your specific purpose for your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not like I just want to throw something out there. And you know, and you need to kind of find a clever name for your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So people can know it right off. It's not like Roy's podcast of the day or whatever. You know?
That's pretty original.
Yeah. And if you can have secure good people to interview on your podcast, that really helps you a lot. You know, you need to have good audio for your podcast.
Absolutely.
Way to monetize it is just try to find people that'll sponsor your podcast. And, you know, I think for most people that would come in time based on your content. You know, I don't think you can be able to go unless you got a good buddy and say, yeah, I'll sponsor your podcast. You know, if they're going to spend money on it, there's got to be something there for it, you know.
Absolutely.
And you need to try to be unique. Were we going to say something, Robert?
Oh, no, I mean, all I was going to add in, I'm just kind of adding in as you're hitting certain points, Roy, is even for like the two ladies that are on with us today. So welcome, Leslie and April. But I just wanted to mention, you know, it's interesting because I'm working with both of them, and podcasting just happens to be, it's not always the number one fit for every business, but it really works for a wide variety of businesses. It's not just you would think that it's just a certain type of business, but, you know, Leslie has a very powerful message. She already works with communities and groups of faith. And so for her, it's perfect to be able to extend that reach out through a podcast. And we talked about the fact, we all have talked about this before, but, you know, Leslie, like your exercise a month ago was to know who your avatar is, know who your audience is, right? And once you start to drill that down, then that actually can apply not just to your video, not just to your clients, but to the podcast. Like that's the genre, that's the person you're looking for, and then go from there. And then the reason why I wanted to mention both people that were on is that April, it applies to her business, but even more so, I actually am part of a networking group with April, and she actually hosts it at one of her businesses, and it's for a local community. And so as I'm even starting to look at that more, not even on a national level, we think podcasting is just all about, you know, global and national, but it can actually be just very localized as well. So I just wanted to mention the fact that, in other words, if I was spotlighting the businesses in my local community, a podcast is a perfect way to get that message out there. And every week you could actually be speaking to another business owner in the community and just talking to them about whatever. It doesn't matter if it's a grocer or if it's the librarian that happens to manage your local library, right? And so I like that idea. I like the fact that this is a tool that can be used across the board.
Yeah, it's great for local. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think a lot of people really take advantage of that.
Exactly.
Like they could.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've got local organizations, you got local businesses that, you know, that would love to have the chance to come and be interviewed.
Exactly.
Get their message out.
Yep. I know you're hearing this, April, but that's a big thing for the community efforts that you're putting together right now. So I know you're already working with others based on the community, but podcasting would be a great way to reach out. The other thing is, and I'll let you get back on topic, Roy, but this is pretty valuable when I think of the fact that, so why does it stand, you know, in its own category compared to just your regular format of marketing? And that is the fact that, again, as we said, you have control. So if I'm hosting a live event, meaning that I've got somebody in the community, they're coming here, you've got to schedule things, you have to prep things, you can't cancel appointments, no one can be sick, you know, there's all these factors that go into that. But with a podcast, you know, without getting too raw, I can be sitting here in my underwear and I can reach out to another business. We can talk about whatever. There doesn't have to be any video. And then you can edit and post or do whatever you'd like with that on your terms. And so it's a great piece of content for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so once you do a podcast, excuse me, at the end of your podcast, just summarize what you've covered. Introduce yourself to your guest at the first of the podcast, who you are and your guest. Explain your purpose so the new people coming onto your podcast will kind of have an idea of what it's about, what you're about, and what you're covering. If you're doing graphics for your podcast, use really good artwork. That's real important. If you notice, all the big podcasters, they do have very nice graphics for their podcast. That whether it's the announcement of the podcast, the background of the podcast, they'll green screen and put some nice image back there. So if you're doing the video as well, that's really important. And another thing about podcasts, you've really got to make sure that your podcast works well with storytelling. Because that's basically what you're going to be doing. Telling a story, your story, or someone else's story. So, I'm not sure a technical how to put a lawnmower together would be a good podcast.
But it might for the right audience.
For the right audience. Now, if you had a lawnmower group, it would be perfect.
Yeah.
But technical stuff, but it's you got to be able to tell the story. You got to take the people on the journey. So, there's ways to monetize a podcast. You can sell sponsorship to your podcast. You can have an episode that you did was really a good episode. You can sell that as a premium. You could repurpose your content for the podcast. You can syndicate your podcast.
There you go. Let's pause on that just for a moment. Syndication is huge. We've talked about it in this group quite often. Hence the collaborative, right? It's all about collaborating. It's all about edifying, syndicating. And when you think about that overall, another great thing is it almost becomes a resume to your business as well, meaning that I know an individual, hopefully we can get him on in the next few weeks to just talk with us. He's very, very busy, but he was the gentleman I spoke to you about later. I'll post his information later this week, actually, as long as I can confirm a few things with him. But I basically alluded to the fact that he was in jail, right? He was in jail for a while. You remember me talking about this young man. And when he came out, podcasting was the best way for him to get his voice out there, right? He just had all these stories to tell. He had things to talk about. He wanted more out of life. And he started out small, and he was just taking every little person he could. If he ran into somebody locally that said, oh, I own a business, all right, get on my podcast. And now I told you he actually picks and chooses. He's had Grant Cardone. He's had Ty Lopez, many, many, many others. And so now he's it's premium client base. But talk about syndication and talk about it as a resume, he wasn't able to get Grant Cardone or any of these other people until actually he submitted some of his content to the people that manage, booking Grant Cardone, for instance. So think about it that way. Leslie, I'll pick on you for a moment since you're right here live. And that's the fact that you could have all kinds of wonderful guests, but then you just might nail it. You might have that one guest that just blows your mind. It blows everyone's mind. You have great feedback, from your audience. And then that's when you go for the bigger people, right? So if you've got someone major in the community, if you have people in, whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whatever it may be, business that need to hear that message, whatever that is, that becomes a very valuable piece, not just a normal podcast. And so it almost becomes like part of your portfolio. you have the ability to then send that off for other people to listen to, and then to invite them to come on your show. And so it's kind of using that leverage. Listen to me, and I'd love to have you on the show. And so, yeah, perfect. Thanks, Roy. I just had to pause on syndication for a moment.
No, but you think about it. I mean, doing a podcast is a really easy way for somebody to get started. I mean, you do a podcast and do an interview podcast is really good, because I mean, no matter what it is, you start interviewing people, and the more people you interview, well, don't take it the wrong way, the better caliber of person that you're going to be interviewing as you go. So it may be your friends at first, but then, people in the industry you're in, or business, or social media, or whatever, you start interviewing more and more of those. You become an influencer. Let's put it that way. That's the word I was looking for. You find influencers, and you have the option to become an influencer as well. And most people have most of the stuff they need to do a podcast already. And and for probably under $500, you could have a pretty nice beginner setup to do podcast.
Absolutely. And as we stated before, if you're just getting started, you could quite, as long as you have good sound, then you could actually do it with Zoom or some of these other, there's even free platforms that could at least allow you to scratch the surface, right?
Right. Yeah. Just to get started, and you're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be professional, but the more, it's like anything else, the more you do it, the better you're going to become at it. You just have to get out there and do it. If someone's wanting to get in and start a business from home, podcasting wouldn't be bad. Are you going to make any money at first? Probably not, but you could work your way into it. Or you could be something as a side hustle, do your day job, do a podcast, as a way to just, work your way up to extra money. So the different types of podcast, in my opinion, the one I like the best is the interview podcast, because to me, I like to, learn about other people. This guy's successful now, but how did he start out? What pitfalls did he have? What did he overcome? Because everybody can relate to those things in their life. Everybody's had some setbacks. Everybody's had bad, things happen to them and whatever. And so that rapport's there. You can just do a solo podcast. If you want to talk about X topic, just do a podcast about X topic. Another one I think is good, which I think would like be for us to be the panel type podcast, where there's several people there and they're basically interviewing one or two people. And and you see a lot of those podcasts. You could have one's called a conversational, where you and I are just sitting there talking about life or whatever. We're just having a conversation. I'm getting to know you, you're getting to know me, people are getting to know both of us and whatever we're talking about. Another one that's some of the popular, there's nonfiction storytelling podcast. I went to school with a guy, he's an actor now. And you talk about an incredible storyteller. He's written a lot of books. He does podcasts. He does storytelling, and I mean, he is awesome. He's amazing. I wish I could have that talent, but besides his success as an actor, he's got a lot more success, and his podcast is really growing. But he's an excellent storyteller. You could do fiction storytelling. You could do a podcast that repurposes your content. Hybrid podcast. Right now, if you could do political podcast,
You'd have more content than you ever need to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's unlimited. I mean, you could do one every hour.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause there's just so much out there. You know,
Yeah.
and political podcasting is really taking off.
Mhm.
You know, you of course you see it. You know, I don't have to tell you about that. So basically, you know, that's what I have. You know, we covered what is podcasting, the popularity of it, you know, why you want to do one, how to start one, and the different types. And next week, we'll be talking about podcasting equipment.
Hmm.
That'll be the topic for next week.
Okay. So in podcasting, I'm going to throw this out to anyone that wants. Does anyone listen to a podcaster now? And if so, what are, unless this is some secret private group that you belong to, what are some of the reasons why you like this podcaster? Just what's some of the value that you personally, and that whether it's the tone, the individual, anything. Yeah, Wendy.
I listened to a couple of, I don't know, I don't necessarily consider them political podcasters. I think that they have kind of started leaning a little political, but I started listening to them mainly because the mainstream media is so far left, and I just wanted to find news as news, not news as the left wants to interpret it, or, you know.
Or right. I mean, just neutral is what, yeah.
Right, but really, I mean, Fox is sort of right, but really it's kind of not right. It's even more a little left. And so I just wanted to start hearing the real news, the facts. I wanted to hear the good and the bad, not just whatever the Democratic National Party wants us to hear from the mainstream media. And so I listen to some that are, you know, a little further leaning right than maybe they should be, but I also listen to some who just, they really know their stuff, and they're telling us the facts, like follow the money. And then they lay out, you know, how to follow the money and show where the connections are, and, you know, what's really happening, and not just what somebody wants us to hear. And so it's personality, but it's also the type of information, you know, that they give.
All right.
So some are interpreting, some are just reporting, some are opining, some are doing all three, you know.
So you sought out, and you've been drawn to them because it provides you ultimately, I mean, with more information based on multiple sources that you're not just going to have from one source, right? Whether, you know, where that's coming from. Okay. So content is important. Uncensorship is important, you know, in that situation. Which, by the way, I just want to acknowledge the fact that we, as the Advanced Branding Collaborative, accept all walks of life, no matter what you believe and who. So I know Wendy was about to pull out her concealed weapons permit.
No, I don't carry concealed weapons. I don't have any weapons. I'm joking.
No. That's a very valid. It's a very valid response, because, you know, I like that. It's almost like when I thought of, even when I started to migrate from traditional radio into like Sirius, you know, when I drive around, and because it gave me a wide variety of content, obviously commercial free, kind of like that too, but just the ability to listen to a lot of people uncensored. And so podcasting gives you that, plus the ability of even a broader range of content. So, okay.
I've only listened to podcasts on YouTube. Listened on YouTube. I mean, so,
okay.
But I like the fact, what something that I really like about it is I can speed it up to double time, you know? So if somebody's a real slow talker, you know, I can speed them up.
Get me to the end of the sermon.
Yeah. But I mean, I can consume more content faster. in a
Okay.
shorter amount of time. So I like that too. And I'm also not confined to, okay, 6:30, now it's time for news. I can listen to news whenever I want to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And yeah. And I also have some more faith-based ones I like to listen to as well. But
Okay. Anyone else? I mean, because those are all, I like that.
Well, go ahead,
Just
Jenny.
want to ask, so because so far I've only been listening really to audiobooks, so not really podcasts. So what app do you recommend? Where do you find your podcasts?
Well, you know what? I wanted to tell you, Wendy, and to you too, Jenny. If you have an iPhone, there is an app, a podcast app, and that's
Yep.
what I use.
Yeah.
mhm.
Okay, no, I don't have an iPhone. I have Android.
And so you can probably just download a podcast app.
You can just go to the App Store.
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
does Android have a App Store?
Yeah,
Yes,
there's
it's Google Play.
Yeah.
Google
See,
Play.
Yeah. In fact, Google Play has its own podcast app as
Right.
well. I mean,
So
for
you
sure.
hear, well, if you this one right, this middle one on the bottom, that's the
Yeah.
Apple Podcast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
What's that?
But that's iPhone. That's a
Yeah, for
podcast
iPhone.
app.
Yeah.
The Nasty Ladies of Texas.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
that app?
The other thing that I just recently read a big article on is Spotify is getting into the podcasting arena.
Mhm.
And so you could download Spotify. And I believe that the podcasts are free. I don't think you have to pay for those like you do the music, at least
No,
not yet.
And
So you
the
can
week
use
after next, we'll be going
that
over
app.
podcasting apps.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, actually, this will be good for some of the future stuff we're going to be going over in the next couple of weeks. In regards to the fact that anybody that is on live right now or actually watches the replay later this week, if you have a favorite podcasting channel, whether it's Android or whether it's iPhone, et cetera, let us know. As a matter of fact, we'll probably post something right after this event or this week, and we'll be asking people, what's your favorite podcast channel, your outlet? What do you use? Because that's great information for all of us. So I'm glad you actually asked that, Jenny. That's good. You can't just refer to something like YouTube, like Wendy stated, but then there are many different apps that allow you.
You can
Yeah, I
find
think I would prefer
podcasts.
an app because I like to listen also when I'm driving.
Mhm.
And then you can put YouTube on while you're driving.
Absolutely. I do the same exact thing, actually,
You can,
especially when my family's all sleeping and I'm driving with my one earbud on.
yeah, you can go on Twitter and find podcasts.
Yeah.
So,
I like it.
So maybe something to do also in that post is we could ask people for their favorite entrepreneurial podcasts or online business. I mean, we stay away from, the news and politics and all that, but it might be good because I don't know all of the podcasts that are out there for online business or just entrepreneurship. And so there might be something really valuable that someone could say, oh yeah, watch this.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Yeah.
I think, ultimately, when I think of how this could apply to our audience and ourselves, I mean, just overall, is in the Advanced Branding Collaborative, it would be nice to be able to break things down based on some of our core principles, And so anything that anyone has in regards to heart set, mindset, faith, right? Because there's a lot of people that actually do, draw their energy from that. So if you've got some of the favorites around that, and then business, as you stated, Wendy, those are really
makes sense. Mindset.
Yep.
Everybody needs a good mindset podcast to listen to.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Leslie, do you have someone you listen to right now? I mean, anyone specific, or why do you listen to them? Is it content, or is it the tone of their voice, or do they make you laugh?
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through all the ones I listen to, and they're really across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a lot of startup camp podcasts. I have a lot of coaching podcasts, but of course I also have a lot of faith-based podcasts. There's this one, and I'm trying to find him. It's a priest, and he does a podcast every week, and he is funny as all heck.
Yeah.
he just gets real. And I love the interviewing ones. I love the conversation. I listen to Maria Shriver, her
Oh,
podcast.
yeah.
You know, so I love that back and forth, just the rawness, since it's not censored, they're real, and you really get a sense of what is going out there in the world and how people are really feeling, and you get a pulse of what's going on, and it really helps me to direct my business. So
yeah, it's interesting that you're even saying that, because now that I'm even reflecting on it, you know, when you watch a movie or you watch a video that's already been doctored and edited, which is still good, it has its place, but it's exactly that. It's edited, it's doctored, all of that rawness, the mistakes, it's all taken out, right?
yeah.
But when you listen to a podcast, I mean, there's something unique. There's something about, you know, even something as simple as I heard from someone before, clearing your voice or a quick cough, or being like, because you actually feel like you're sitting there and you're just talking to a friend. You're not, you know, you're hearing everything, right? You're hearing the mistakes, you're hearing the you're hearing all of that. So
Well,
I like the unedited podcasts.
they become real, and they stay with you. I mean, they leave an impression on your heart. The one that comes to mind for me was you know, Maria Shriver. She has meaningful conversations, and she was interviewing Hoda, is it Kopi Kopa, you know, from the
Hoda Kotb.
yeah, Hoda.
Oh yeah.
You know, 50 something, never had children. She can't have children, and she was going through this adoption process, and one fell, you know, an adoption fell through, and I mean, just the pain and the vulnerability, and you know, she started crying, and it was just, you know, as someone that's, you know, turning 50 next month and in that age group, you felt her pain. I'm thinking there's a lot of women that are probably, and here you would think that this woman has it all. She's on TV every day. She has millions and millions of dollars. But the one thing that she wanted, she can't get. And it was causing her so much grief and pain and anguish. And when she finally did get it, I mean, she, like she said, she goes, I will trade this all for everything. And it was, you know, you just felt connected to her. You felt like, okay, they're people just like we are. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone, every idol we have, everyone that we look up to, for most of them, they take showers, they get dressed one foot, you know, one leg at a time, just like we do, unless you're really at that high level of wealth where someone may bathe you. I'm not sure,
exactly.
But it doesn't happen very often.
Unless you're Jeff Bezos, right? Yeah.
But yeah, they are. And quite frankly, we talk about storytelling a lot, right? In around podcasting, and everyone has a story, and everyone's story has its peaks and its valleys, as we talked about. Everyone. So even if it's somebody that, you know, we're going, oh my gosh, they're a multimillionaire, how could they have any problems in their life? But at the end of the day, they may actually cherish or want something that you have, even more, as you just stated, something that's even greater to them than money, right?
Well, yeah, and she said that when she lives in New York, and she goes, it was really debilitating her. She goes, I couldn't even walk the streets of New York, because when I would see mothers with their babies strolling them and, you know, rushing to get to work, and she goes, I would just break down and cry because they had what I wanted. And yeah, and absolutely. And you're thinking, oh, hey, hold on, you know, as you're walking by, and she's like, oh, I want your baby, you know. Exactly. So
and so, like, think about just in the contrast, you know, between Wendy and yourself, the fact that podcasting has opened the door to knowledge, so we can seek more knowledge, more understanding, more information, right, at our fingertips. And then also in your example that you just stated, it's like something that touched your heart. And so it makes you feel like warm and connected, and you realize, you know, and so it provides a little of everything.
oh yeah.
That's the beautiful thing. It's like having the ability to read a book, which is probably why the numbers are as big as they are, Roy, when you talked about how many people listen to podcasts and for how many hours a week. Because not everyone has the ability, if you have a job or you have some type of function, not everyone has the ability to sit down and read a book every single week. But podcasting opens that window of opportunity for you, you know, with
And that huge connection. And I think it also, I learned empathy after listening to that. And I actually changed the behavior on how I ask women what their lifestyles are, and not just to assume that they're a mother or that they're a wife.
Yeah.
Because they could be going through that pain that she was experiencing. So, you know, I just totally have taken that out of my vocabulary now. And, you know, and I ask different questions to find out what their life is like, or, you know,
right.
What is their family image, you know? So.
And the other thing that's good based on what we're all talking about is the fact that if you're planning on doing your own podcast at some point in your business or your life, right? By listening to other podcasts, you're going to get a better flavor of your style, how you want to conduct it, your intros, your exits, you know, just kind of the whole overall theme of how you want to manage your own podcast.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I like that. Anyone else?
Well, you know, I listen, I'm like Wendy, I kind of like the alternative news. So I listen to some of those, but then, you know, I like listening to Gary Vee, you know, I mean, because he's just right in your face out there. It is what it is.
About as raw as you could get.
Yeah. But I mean, it's there. And that's what, and I really like that, you know.
Yeah.
We've got language kind of sometimes gets, you know, but other than that, I mean, but his content's there. He puts it out there. I mean, he tells it like it is, period.
You know, it's interesting when it comes to, the reason why I'm saying this is I'm even thinking of podcasts. I'm thinking of like Sirius Radio when we talked about that, where it's unedited. It's interesting when we talk about language. And I'll just say this, you know, just based on my own life. And if raw language is ever used derogatory, right? It just sounds like, ooh, like, oh, I can't believe you know, like, that's bad. It sounds bad, right? We're programmed to say that sounds bad. We shouldn't be saying that to people. But there's something about good content and being real with people where, like, if we're sitting here and we're having a real conversation and I say, you know what, if you don't get off, right, your ass and do something, then you're never going to get what you want out of life. No one actually looks at that statement and goes, oh my gosh, what did he just say? And it's because it's delivered with truth, right? There's truth behind the message that you're delivering. But it made me think of that because Gary Vee does that brilliantly. I mean, you may not even like F-bombs, but he throws somebody out there, you're like, oh, I get what he's talking about. I understand.
Yeah.
It's one thing to, you know, say some profanity here and there, well placed at, you know, the right time or whatever. But it's another thing when you're saying the F-bomb every 10 words or, you know, I mean, sometimes like for me, Gary Vee's great, but I start to just focus on how many times he says the F-bomb. So then I'm totally losing the whole intent
You're losing
of
the message.
the podcast. Yeah.
And, well, that's a good point, but that's so again, awesome, because you have the choice. Everyone has the choice of who they plug into and who they don't. By the way, I don't even want to get hung up on that, but if you don't like messages delivered with an F-bomb every other word, then don't watch
Any comedians.
Oh, well,
Specials.
yeah. I mean, yeah. But no, Tony actually has his own program on Netflix.
Tony Robbins?
Yeah, Tony Robbins. Have you
yeah.
the one on Netflix?
I've seen it. Yeah.
And I turned it on and I was listening. I was focused on the content. I'm like, okay, you know. And Kelly's like going, F-bomb, F-bomb, F-bomb. You know, after a while, she was like, what the heck is this? So exactly the same situation you talked about, Wendy. You just, sometimes if you can't connect, you know, but again, that's also understanding your audience, right? I mean, Leslie, with your audience, if you started throwing F-bombs every other word, you're going to lose them pretty quick.
Yeah, they'll be definitely saying I'm going to hell.
Exactly. So you gotta know your audience. It's really crucial. If you don't, then your audience can still find you, but you're going to lose a lot of opportunity, right? For sure. So very good. So yeah, even for myself, there's a few that I listen to, but what I find is, especially since, I mean, everyone knows I've been in the world of business for many, many years, and I'm addicted to it. I mean, every aspect of it. Half of my library is if it's not, some of it's faith-based, but majority of everything I have is on business. And so for myself, I like the ability to listen to a huge variety of people that have different perspectives. And some of them even conflict with one another. One person says, this is what you need to do to be successful. This person says, this is what you need to do to be successful. Two different directions. But it gives me now the information to then make my own choices. Now I'm educated enough to go, okay, you know what? There is two different ways of getting to the same results. Which path do I see myself choosing, or which one's a better fit for me? So that's another great thing, is you have just all the information you want at your fingertips. Very good. Roy, did you have anything else on there, or are we just we're gonna talk about equipment here in the next
yeah, we'll be talking about equipment the next week.
Okay.
So
excellent.
Quite varied.
Yeah, Leslie, if you or anyone that's listening has a podcaster, a favorite podcaster that you are connected with on social media or anything of that nature, to where they would be willing to come on in a few weeks and talk about their experiences, the do's, the don'ts, the trials, the ups, the downs of just podcasting in general, please throw their name in a hat. So,
yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's it for today, right? Is that all we got?
Yeah, Leslie, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Roy. That was very informational. Thank you. I always learn something when I pop on here. So
Yeah. Thank you.
Good. We're glad to hear that.
Yep.
Share with everyone. Tell them to join the ABC.
yes, I do. Yeah. So thank you.
Awesome. So great. So again, anyone watching the replay, if you have some thoughts, some content, things you want to add in, questions, feel free to put them out there. We're going to be actually doing a few posts over the next few days that are going to basically prompt some of these questions we talked about. Who's your favorite podcaster? What are some of the channels or outlets you use? Why do you love podcasting? Or maybe even why maybe you don't like podcasting. Tell us why, because all that's good information to understand the dynamic of the audience. But other than that, thank you, Roy, for some preparation there.
Okay.
We do appreciate it, and I look forward to this. There's a huge opportunity for us, not just in talking about podcasting, but really the ultimate goal here in the next few weeks is to start lining each of you up with an opportunity to be on a podcast if you wish to do so.
Yeah.
Very good. All right.
Sounds good.
Bye, everybody.
All right.
Bye. Thanks, Roy.
Good night.
No,
Talk
that's
soon.
it.
Bye.
All right. Bye.